Now here's a fun little exercise in experimenting with custom brushes inside Photoshop. So here I have an image, and I want to add a little bit more interest in this. I want to have kind of a scattered, almost like it's made up of a bunch of broken parts, and kind of forms in the center here around her face. Now, that may not make sense, but let's do it. Let's go ahead and do it just so you can see what I'm talking about here. First, I'm going to go into the Layers panel. I'm going to double click on the layer, the background layer, just to make it a regular layer. So we'll just hit OK there. I'm going to create a new layer beneath this original layer here by holding down my Command or Control key and clicking the new layer icon will drop the new layer beneath it. As normally, if I click it, normally it by default puts it on top. But by holding that Command or Control key down, we can put the layer beneath. And I'm just going to fill that layer with white. So let's just go ahead and press Command or Control Delete or backspace. So background layer filled with white, and there's our image. Now we're going to put a layer mask on this image, but I want it to hide the image as I add it. So I'm going to hold down my Option key or the Alt key, and I'm just going to click on that layer mask, and it will fill that layer mask with black, which will hide everything on this layer. Now let's go and create our brush that we're going to use. So select the brush tool. I'm just going to go ahead and bring up the brush options panel here. And first thing we're going to do is inside the brush preview window here, I'm going to go into the out menu here. Let's go into this little fly out menu and go down, and we're going to choose the square brushes right here. It's the preset set of square brushes inside Photoshop. And there we have that. And I'm going to select the biggest one. In fact, I want one bigger than that, but we'll select the biggest one and make it bigger on our own. And let's highlight brush tip shape and increase the spacing a little bit. Let's go to about 75. And I'm going to activate shape dynamics here. And we want to make sure that we've got the angle jitter set all the way to 100. Let's push that all the way up. Size jitter. I don't want the size to jitter. I want to keep all the blocks the same size. So let's take this down to 0. And let's activate scattering. And we're going in there, we're going to scatter this really crazy. Let's go up to about 500. That looks pretty good. Maybe not, well, maybe not that much. Something like that. In fact, I'm going to go back to brush tip shape here and increase that spacing a little bit more. Just like that. So now we've got a nice scattered square brush there. So let's go ahead and close this. And we want to make sure we're painting directly on the layer mask. So make sure that you have those highlighted lines around it. Not on the regular layer, but on the layer mask itself. And, of course, it is filled with black, which is hiding everything, so we need to paint with white in order to reveal what's on this layer. So we're going to flop the colors here in our toolbar, just clicking that little arrow there, and that will bring the white forward. And let's use our bracket keys to make our brush a little bit bigger. Right about that. Let's just do a test. Looks pretty good. Actually, we could probably make it a little bit smaller. I'm just going to undo that brushing there. And I'm going to go back into the layer, and I'm just going to double click on the layer icon there to bring up the layer style options here. We're going to add a drop shadow. And just going to leave it to its default settings and just hit OK. Now, we don't see anything, of course, because the layer mask is hiding everything. So we're going to highlight back on that layer mask, then use our brush and begin painting in. Now you can see we're getting an interesting scatter effect, and because of that drop shadow is revealing itself, it kind of has a dimensional look to it. So I'm just going to kind of paint and get much more filled in around her face here. And about like that. So I'm going to back up my brush options and increase that spacing a little bit as I paint toward the outer edge. So let's just kind of scatter paint around here. And you can see this is all we're doing. We're painting directly on the layer mask, revealing that area of the image as we paint. We're not doing anything to our original layer, which is good. Just in case we want to change the image out or do something else like that altogether. So now it's looking like we're making it up of just a bunch of little square pieces that are kind of coming together. And just paint a little bit of here, a little scatter around here. Now, here's kind of a cool thing. If I flop my colors here, like I did before, if I make black my foreground color, and still painting on the layer mask. Just start going around here. I can make those pieces like they're all broken up, like they're smaller fragments of something. But all I'm really doing is just going on the outer edge here on these pieces that are way out. And I could go a little bit inside here just to give it a much more broken up effect here. But it really looks like this is just broken up particles. Maybe it's an image that's just completely just shattered or something like that. So I can mess with that a little bit more, but I'm not going to right now. So let's say I've got that pretty good. I'm actually going to go and duplicate this layer. And on that duplicate layer, I'm going to go under the filter menu and go to blur, radial blur. And we're going to apply a zoom blur, and I want to set the amount to about 75. Really blur it like crazy. And I want the blur center to be right about where her face is. So in relation to where her face is on the overall document, let's kind of position the target in roughly the same area, which would probably be right about there. And then we'll hit OK. So there we get a really crazy blur there. Well, I want to bring the detail back into her face here. So working on the layer mask of that blurred layer and painting with black, because we want to mask it away, it's going to start painting those squares in. And we'll just bring those areas back. And the fact that it's scattering like this is giving us an interesting result in areas that we're not painting. It's almost like that blur is breaking through. There's like several levels here, so it's giving us a very interesting effect here. Almost has a 3D effect to it, like it's really just exploding out of the background here, or almost as if the image is breaking through. So you can see it's got a lot of possibilities. And as I said, this is a lot of experimentation. Just playing around with brushes and layer masks and all kinds of different effects like that. And again, that's all we're working on the layer mask. We haven't even affected the image yet, well, except for this one because we applied the blur to it. But there's our original image here that we can go back into that layer mask and mask some areas out, or in fact flip those colors again, which, by the way, I'm using the X key on my keyboard just to flop those colors back and forth. And maybe bring some area back in here. But you can see the possibilities you have by working on multiple layers and using these custom brushes in very, very different ways. So there it is, trying to get some experimentation just to achieve some very interesting effects. So give it a try yourself and see what kind of results you get. We'll see you next time.